And Professor Juan Minuti, I'd like you to come up here now to introduce today's speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Ana Minuti. I am an associate professor of musicology and associate chair of the music department and the coordinator of the musicology colloquium this year. And I'm delighted to have you all here for our inaugural lecture of 2024-25. Thank you so much for coming. It is my real pleasure to introduce Dr. Adolfo Estrada, who is an Inclusive Excellence Postdoctoral and Visiting Fellow in the Department of Music, the first that we have in the department. And he's also one of the co-instructors of the Mariachi Ensemble here at UNM. Dr. Estrada completed his PhD in ethnomusicology at Texas Tech University in 2022 and comes to us with an incredible trajectory as a mariachi scholar, educator, and performer. Dr. Estrada's research focuses on historical and contemporary mariachi performance practice. In his doctoral dissertation titled Ritual and Meaning in the Mariachi Festival Movement of the United States, he explores Victor Turner's notion of communitas and the liminal spaces within various components of the U.S. mariachi festival movement. During his time as a postdoctoral fellow here at UNM, he is converting that dissertation into a book, which we're really excited about. Musical performance is a central component of Dr. Estrada's research and teaching. Within the mariachi community, he is known as an expert of the Mariachi Armonía section, which functions similarly to the continuous section of the Baroque ensemble comprising classical guitar, vihuela, guitarra de golpe, arpa, and guitarrón. He has played with mariachi ensembles in Mexico and the US as a guitarist and as a singer, a vocalist. Some of his notable performances include the 2013 inaugural ceremonies for the US President in Washington, D.C., the 2015 world premiere of the Chicago lyric mariachi opera El Pasado Nunca Se Termina, and appearances on The Tonight Show and The Stephen Colbert Show. As a professional mariachi musician, he has accompanied notable artists and ensembles, such as Plácido Domingo, Flor Silvestre, Vicky Carr, and the Mariachi Vargas de Tecatitlán, among others. Since 2002, Adolfo has been continually invited to give masterclasses at various mariachi workshops in the United States and Mexico. He also serves as an adjudicator and clinician for mariachi festivals and competitions throughout the Southwest and beyond. Before joining the UNM faculty, he was a lecturer teaching courses in Latin American music and directed the mariachi ensembles at Texas Tech University and Texas State University. So I would like to thank the Department of Music and the Latin American and Iberian Institute for making this event possible. And without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Mutig, the musical notations and the Mariachi Tradition, the churches and challenges. One of the national musical symbols of Mexico, mariachi music has gone beyond beyond its place of origin into a world genre. In the United States, the large Mexican heritage diaspora maintains the mariachi tradition thriving throughout the country. Several innovations to the mariachi tradition initiated in the United States have significantly influenced the mariachi tradition in Mexico as well. Today, I will speak about the mariachi tradition in the U.S. and how it has shaped the multiple approaches concerning its musical notation. As the mariachi tradition has developed into academic institutions, the demand for written mariachi music has significantly increased. Traditionally, mariachi was predominantly an oral tradition. However, the genre has developed into a much larger ensemble with expanded instrumentation and more complex arrangements, making notation necessary. Mariachi music transcribers exemplify a wide variety of approaches and, as a whole, demonstrate a lack of standardization. In today's lecture, I elucidate the themes surrounding the transcription of mariachi music and investigate their practical and cultural implications for the tradition. The transcription of mariachi presents its own set of challenges, particularly in the representation of defining complex musical characteristics. I argue that without the production of these transcriptions, the proliferation of mariachi festival workshops and academic mariachi programs would not have been possible to the degree that was seen into it. So those of us who may not be too familiar with mariachi, it's the question that what is a mariachi? The mariachi tradition is a musical tradition from West Central Mexico. For most of its initial periods, the mariachi tradition has been historically monopolized exclusively by men, and in almost every aspect of its dissemination developed. The mariachi tradition functions as celebratory music for various life cycle events significant to the Mexican diaspora and all the people of Latin American backgrounds. Mariachi music can follow a person from birth, baptism, marriage, birthday celebrations, divorces, death, and many other life cycle events.
That's it.
Yeah, a celebration. The vast repertoire has meaningful songs for all occasions, and people can express their joy and sorrow through this. Prior to the Mexican Revolution, mariachi ensembles were rurally based music ensembles, performing and performed by prosperous agrarian communities. Mariachi music was the exclusive music that these rural communities utilized in their celebrations, indicating their status, wealth, and just the simple function of community engagement. However, the Mexican Revolution and subsequent military campaigns, like the Cristero Rebellion, disseminated the prosperity of these communities. So we see that not just for musicians, but for the Mexican populace in general, the Mexican Revolution and subsequent military battles disseminate this economic structure, and people start flooding towards the urban centers, much like Mexico soon. Mariachi musicians were no exception. Once established in these major urban centers, the mariachi underwent a multitude of changes toward becoming the modern mariachi ensemble we know today. Initially, mariachi ensembles comprised of stringed instruments. A typical ensemble consisted of 4 members, 2 violins, some kind of strum guitar variant, and a bass instrument. So yes, just particularly a string-based ensemble, rural agrarian. You can see there's no codification of dress either. The instruments are still, there's a lot of variations in the instruments. Those are not standardized. Some are wearing watches, others shoes. And if you notice the importance of the armonia in the front and the melody in the for violins back. Whereas we get to the period after the Mexican Revolution and years, mariachi Guadalajara ensemble from the same region, now with prioritizing violins at front, melodies at front, and armonia near the bell, and the inclusion of a trumpet. So let's get into a little bit more. So most scholars, and I ascribe to this as well, is that we see mariachi in a dichotomy, a rural to urban dichotomy. And when we talk about this is a little representation of it. But it comes with so many other points to consider. One is that they are in a recording studio, they're in a radio studio, and so the arrangements are much more complex. They have to be much more organized in the matter. Instrumentation, delineation, and classification. At present, standard mariachi instrumentation incorporates about 6 violins, 2 or 3 trumpets, harp, a guitarron, a bass-producing instrument, and at least 2 strummed guitars. The violins, for all intents and purposes, are standard European violins. Very, very early proto-mariachi ensembles, the world pre-revolution, you will see violins made out of cane, sugarcane, different instruments. They pretty much utilize whatever. And these were copies of the instruments that were brought over by the Spanish. Mariachi ensembles today, again, can accommodate up to 6 violins in the section. And they typically perform in a manner that's harmonized melodies. They're either playing unison or up to 5 parts to unison, generally 3 parts. The trumpet was added into the mariachi between the 1920s and the 1940s. It undergoes a period of experimentation. So initially, it was just 1 trumpet in the mariachi ensemble. But now during that period of experimentation, people were pushing for and against, and different ensembles resisted the inclusion of the trumpet because it was not a stringed instrument. But because of its place in radio and because of the limitations of recording technology, an instrument like the trumpet would be able to cut through it and was most visibly as opposed to a violin section or even the bass produced instruments. So the decision was because of the technological concern. But now ensembles have it's typical to see 3, maybe even 4 trumpets in the mariachi ensembles. And ironically, it's become an instrument ubiquitously that tied to the mariachi ensemble. We think about, what do you think about mariachis? It's trumpets, but it's the last instrument to be by this way, like that. So then, if we're looking at this here, we can see that the melody, the melodia or melody section comprises of trumpets and violins, as opposed to the harmony rhythm or the armonía section, which comprises of distinct instruments. So all of these other sections and the voices as well, but all of these instruments here are unified. They're the exact same instrument. Violins are all the same, trumpets are all the same. But when it comes to the rhythm section, they're all distinct instruments. And arguing also that a fully functioning armonía can serve as its own ensemble. It has rhythm, it has the bass, and it can also produce instances of melody. And along with voices, kind of a self-sustained, self-contained. It's also worthy to note that the armonía serves a similar function kind of as a continuo section of the verb ensemble. You can't really tell what song to play until the other melodic sections come in. They're just holding down a rhythm in time and placing harmonic rhythm so the melody can be harmonized on top of it. Same configuration, violins, trumpets, armonía.
Desde allá del Tejadito, con gusto los invitamos a gozar y a festejar esta fiesta del año. Cuando suena el mariachi, el mundo canta. El mundo canta cuando suena el mariachi. Cuando el mariachi suena, el mundo canta. El mundo canta cuando suena el mariachi. ¡Viva el mariachi!
The U.S. mariachi movement. Although the mariachi tradition within the United States draws heavily from the practice in Mexico, the U.S. has created significant contributions to the movement as a whole. And I have a list here that we'll be going through. The first is the academic movement, and that is university mariachi ensembles. The first university mariachi ensemble is pictured here, and that's at UCLA in 1963. There are no persons of Hispanic or Latin descent in this ensemble class. To the left here, we have Donald Borchard, who in 1961 started the Mexican Music Study Lab at UCLA. There were 5 graduate students in the lab. One of them was Art Garcia. And in that student lab, they explored 3 Mexican genres, which were jarocho, huasteco, and mariachi music. Don Borchard passed away in 1969 in Mexico while finishing his fieldwork. His dissertation was focused on mariachi, and had he finished it, it would have been the first dissertation on the topic. Don Borchard was going to be one of the preeminent scholars of mariachi Mexican music, and his papers are now online if you'd like to see them through the UCLA archives, his holdings. So when Don Borchard started that lab, it ended up becoming the mariachi ensemble at UCLA. And this is where we start. Once the lab starts getting going, we start seeing transcriptions right away. How are we learning? How are we memorizing? And they're tasked with writing down this music that has essentially not been written down not for this purpose. The second burst of transcriptions comes to us from the US-based innovation of the Mariachi Festival movement. The first International Mariachi Festival was in 1979 in San Antonio, and there's an advert from that year. In 1983, the Tucson International Mariachi Festival is founded. And in 1991, the Albuquerque Mariachi Spectacular begins its run as well. And there's many more that have proliferated throughout the United States, but these three are the main ones that are still around today. So they're the longest running, they're the major mariachi ensemble.
This is some of the notation that's encountered at acting festivals. Initially, the festivals had participants of about 300 people, comprising students, people younger in age, and community members and people who were part of mariachi religious Catholic Mass mariachis. So Catholic Mass, you Vatican II, you're able to have Mass in the vernacular, and you're also allowed to have vernacular musics and celebration as Catholic Mass. So mariachi musics and Latin American, Pan American mariachis masses become prolific throughout Latin America. So, and in San Antonio, especially, a lot of two key parishes and congregations there had common mariachis, and those people end up attending the first mariachi festivals. And there was no sheet music in the first years. They were just teaching by rote that year. And so initially, mariachi bacchus was even hesitant to teach at these festivals. They said, we're not teachers, and so we're just thrown into a room. And immediately start to see some leading for that time period, so that there's this initial kind of shock. And once music starts getting written out with something where there's a lot of handwritten notation. You can see this is, of course, I always represent Armonia, basically because it's the least standardized and it's the most versatile that you'll see. It has the most versatility that you'll see. For instance, this is a Bonero, which is a Cuban song form, Cuban origin. So we'll in reality are just kind of leeching whenever there is a change. Previous imitations in heat with balls. And you get used to seeing this kind of fusion. There's something else that's written out with a little bit more rhythmic emphasis. This is a thought, which is a song from ubiquitous to the mariachi. This is using violin bones to identify whether it's a downstroke line strum or an upstrum. Again, handwritten. But as time goes on, these start to become a little bit more serious. Like you start seeing cleaner representations, different experimentations of how these things are notated. Instead of violin bow markings on top, we have just arrows at the bottom. Which arrows at the bottom, and then X's over the note pulse. And this one, you'll see now, you'll just encounter this now. You'll hardly ever see me have regular infants at festivals. It's extremely rare. That you'll see some indications. I think when they're just forcefully needed, but not things to start becoming so codified that they're really not that necessary. Another thing to note is that we see a lot more variation in the way things are written, whether written by hand. I get used to a certain type of hand, if you will, as well. For instance, here, this is a arrangement by Pepe Martinez, but for all intents and purposes, I think is why it was the copies. So here, right out the score, and I think this is the hand. This fight. That's good, man. Then, to now going from a tremendous amount of diversity in levels and skills playing music training at the first festivals of about 300 participants, 300 people attending these clinics. These festivals, the one in Tucson, the one in Albuquerque, go anywhere from 800 participants to 1,200 participants. And so how do you teach music to that many people by rote and by kids? It just makes sense to write things down.
So these are the types of works that we're going to see. This is from this past week, just ended Wednesday in Guadalajara, the 31st Encuentro. So in response to the US having their Mariachi festivals, Mexico initiated their own. And lyrics with text. This is just one of them. This is one from the University of San Diego, a smaller festival. One in Chihuahua, where Chino and I were asked to attend as instructors. Just the amount of music that's produced from these. Here's the one from Tucson International Mariachi Conference, May 1st through 5th of this year. This is the entirety of all of the sheet music that's distributed. And this is just an event that lasts a week, where we pretty much get through all of this music. And here's my booklet from Spectacular de Albuquerque 2023 as an instructor. Some of the issues here and problems, right, that we're not addressing as a community are who's licensing this music to be transcribed? No one really is. And these have authorship, some of them are under copyright, intellectual property. So we're not really dealing with them at all. That's one of the aspects of this. But there are also, on the opposite, there is no sheet music publishing company that has all of this music under their designation. So where do we go? And if this kind of system becomes not sustainable for whatever reason, then we're forced to write new music and create new music so that we are free of this kind of, we're not encumbered by these issues. So Buenos Años Que Me Quedan is a pop song popularized by Gloria Estefan. It's a pop song adapted to mariachi. The second push for mariachi notation comes from public ed. And the pioneer of that, one of the many pioneers, but the most prominent is Del San Miguel. Now he's recently passed away from San Antonio, Texas. And in 1966, she started incorporating Mexican music into her classroom. She's a music ed teacher, piano teacher, and choir teacher. And she thought, she's also responsible for the first Mariachi Festival in '79. So it took her that long for this to gain traction and to have the idea, to have the first Mariachi Festival. But when I talked to her about sheet music and addressing those issues, in the conversations that we had before she passed, she said that there was an importance that the students should know how to read. They should have a transferable skill. That she recognizes that mariachi is an oral tradition, but if you're training someone in public ed, K through 12, they have to have some kind of transferable skill if they're going to move on to university. If they're going to be operating within the modern context of how mariachi is performed, because most mariachis now do read music to some degree. And so the model that we have is that we teach the skill set through the song forms. We're skill building through the repertoire of mariachi, and that's disseminated through the sheet music. So here is just a concise list of some of the types of song genres. Most of them are not unique to the mariachi tradition, but come from all over Latin America. This is why I think it's been popularized as a world genre, and it's an extremely flexible instrumentation that adapts well to most Western music. So between the mariachi festivals, as well as the mariachi K through 12 public education, we have the proliferation of method books. They become a need, and this one here is the very first one. This was published in 1983 by Natividad de Santiago. He revolutionized the technique of the guitarra. And there was a need because after going to the festivals yearly, saying, well, a week is not enough to teach the foundations of this, and no one had written it down before. This comes with audio examples too, which were originally disseminated on LP. Correct playing postures, positions, incorrect playing positions, advice for playing kind of the whole technique, where it's based out of based on, but if you get past the technical things, you'll see how he's written out the guitarron in its full sounding positions.
What
So
would
the
happen if you didn't hold the guitarron correctly?
I don't think it would sound too different. I mean, it's a very forgiving instrument for all intents and purposes. You can hold it a lot of different ways, and I've seen people be very effective in most of them. But I think once you start getting to a level of technical need beyond the 90% of the repertoire that you're going to be playing, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble very quickly. And so one of the offerings that this has is that it goes through every major diatonic scale. It has them written out, but it hasn't written out completely. We'll see the difference between this and how it's represented on sheet music. Other two institutional developments from the U.S. are going to be the UIL, State Mariachi Festival, out of Texas. And the University Interscholastic League was created by the University of Texas at Austin to provide leadership and guidance to public school debate and athletic teachers. Since 1910, the UL has grown into the largest inter-school organization of its kind in the world. The UIL exists to provide educational, extracurricular, academic, athletic, and music contests. The initials UIL have come to represent quality educational competition administered by school people on an equitable basis. Founded in 1910, but it's not until 2016 that UIL held its first Mariachi State Festival. So students compete for a ranking or an evaluation, not a ranking between groups. One being the superior ranking, 5 being a not good one. A very not good one. It's kind of the limits there. This is an example from that first year, 2016, and this is a high school out of South Texas, Roma High School. Students will rehearse these pieces invariably for most of their school year to go and present this at All State Festival. They get a ranking at region, and if they get a high enough ranking, then they go to All State. Serving as a clinician and a judge, because we do both at this week-long event, we're provided with scores, and we're supposed to see them back to back. So everything here should be notated according to the rules and regulations, because they're under the same regulations that band orchestra and choir.
Same for multiple groups are playing the same pieces?
No, they're all different. They can play the same piece, but we're supposed to look over the scores as judges. Most judges don't have enough time because they're giving feedback or recording or assessing the mariachi ensembles. And also a big complication is this, that when someone did check a score, someone else found out that they weren't playing the same piece. So the score was saying something else that they weren't playing. They were bringing a score from somewhere else, where they were playing the same piece from a previous competition, which was, and lawsuits happen. So Texas in competition at high school level is extremely competitive. TMEA, the Texas Music Educators Association, All-State Mariachi Ensemble. TMEA represents more than 17,000 current and future music educator members. TMEA works to support the future of mariachi education in Texas. TMEA quoted its first all-state ensemble in 2021. Students must audition at regional and state levels again to be a part of this ensemble. Selected students attend the TMEA annual convention. There they workshop with the master mariachi clinician for a week, and then they perform. notice the standardization, the configuration is the same. Armonias on the right side, trumpets in the center, violins in the front. That's kind of a standardized way of positioning. Stage plotting. The selection process for who gets to be in our state is through, right now, commissioned arrangements. So I was hired by TMEA for 2 years now, since 2021 or 2019, to write etudes, which don't exist in Mariachi. We don't have etudes. We're still building through the repertoire. So there isn't really the equivalent of an Arbenz or anything, method books, unless you did those previous ones. And etudes are just the last thing. But since it's what's designated for band, orchestra, and choir, it's the paradigm kind of that Mariachi gets put into. And there's arguments on both sides. If you notate it, well then you're kind of getting rid of the tradition. You're changing it. But as we know, traditions change. So all this to come to my experiences as a practitioner, instructor, arranger, and scholar. My experiences navigating musical notation and these capacities allow for a thoroughly embedded study of transcriptions in Mariachi music. Armonía notation, which I will focus on, borrows heavily from Western musical concepts, but they are instruments created by a process of cultural mestizaje, and their notation reflects this type of hybridity. The instruments are also not implemented in a conventional manner. Therefore, armonía notation, although borrowing from many different sources of Western musical notation, are ubiquitous and distinct to the practice. The armonía section is the least standardized in notation and in practice. And in contrast, to the other instruments, violins and trumpets, they just draw directly from their previous Western notations. So there's not a lot of difficulty adapting the prescriptive kind of arrangements that we have. But for armonía, there's still a lot of things that we need. So this is a full armonía section. We have most of these instruments here today. And this is again on the right side of the ensemble facing the stage. Natividad de Santiago, the person who wrote the method book in '83. This picture is from around 1968. Rigoberto Alfaro, Víctor Cárdenas, and the founder of Mariachi Vargas, on guitarra de Jorge Gaspar Vargas. This instrument is hardly ever seen in mariachi anymore. It's only made a comeback in public education in Texas because there's just so many of the other instruments that now you can, or for all state, for instance. Well, I'm not going to make it on guitar well, I have a better shot at guitarra de Borbe because there's so few of them floating around in the pool. And the same goes for the arpa jalisciense. A standard mariachi armonía will just be these two instruments, typically, maybe a guitar. Right? So you can get away with just two out of the 5. And again, the armonía section is comprised of 5 distinct instruments. The arpa jalisciense, which unfortunately we don't have today, is a diatonic harp, 32 strings with no levers, sound holes across the soundboard. So you'll see that's a marker of Baroque instruments of the Baroque period. And so, because of its diatonic tuning and access, maybe just to a few chromatics, with only one hand, you only have accessible, closely related keys, tonic. Maybe go to the 4, maybe go to 5, maybe tonic size 4 and tonic size 5, briefly. And a lot of the literature and repertoire reflects this kind of these tonalities. And its primary function is bass production. It has a secondary function as melodic and harmonic supports. So it can play melody, it can also play what the guitars play. But principally in the Mariachi tradition, the harp serves as a bass function instrument. The second is the guitarrón. It's a large guitar with a vaulted back, 6 strings. The playing technique is plucked in octaves. And the difference between this and the harp, it's more easily, all 12 chromatic tones are accessed a little bit more easily. And there's only 12 positions, so there's 1 position for each chromatic tone. You can extend it up, but it's not really using passes. And here's the tuning, A, D, G, C, E, A. it drops back down.
So you gonna play a tune for us?
Yeah, we'll play a couple measures for you.
And it's an octave.
It's cleft in octaves. But when it's written, it's not written as such. It's just written. It doesn't go above the staff. It's all written within the staff. So if you get any tone within that, the notation dictates that, even if it's sounding somewhere else. Now there are instances where you need a high register. You'll put a dot over it. There's different ways of notating that. But technically, if it's an E, it'll always be that E that you play in that position. The next is the vihuela, or the vihuela mexicana or vihuela de mariachi. It's a small alto loop, also with the vaulted back. Vaulted back construction. Does not directly, so this has very little in common in construction with the Spanish vihuela. The early lutes. The playing technique is different now. We're getting into the territory where these instruments are not plucked or picked, they're strummed. And the primary function here is harmonies and rhythm. So a chord, drum with chords. The basis of the rhythmic and harmonic driving engine of the mariachi ensemble. So this is the tuning, A, D, G, B, E, and again a re-entrant tuning. That is indicative of Baroque instrumentation and Baroque tuning. Only whole step. In sequence. If it were played right from highest to low, a step above that and a step above that. Another implementation of Baroque instrumentation is the frets tied around the neck and not slotted into the fingerboard, and no rectification of the strings. It's just a tie block. There is no saddle for intonation correction. And this is strummed.
How does it get such a loud? It has such a. It's really loud
Yes,
compared to like a ukulele.
correct.
Is it steel string?
No, it's all nylon.
What is there? What's making it so much louder?
These are
Is it the shape?
I think the shape.
partly is the shape, but also these have very, unlike a classical guitar, these have very little type of furnishings and restraints on the inside. So they're very lightly braced. I mean, they're extremely light. And because of that, they're more subject to temperature changes. If someone plays it incorrectly or in a different manner, it's going to change the characteristic of the instrument.
Well,
They're very volatile, they're extremely capricious because of that. But they're not very well reinforced on the inside. Pretty hollow. So this is the way we would see a fully functioning 5-piece armonia playing would be reduced down to these 2 steps. So we have just armonías, which is any strummed instrument, and then the guitarón playing everything. And the guitarón is plucked with mouthpiece. And this is a very practical manner in which most mariachis will notate things. Most arrangers have this pretty much standardized already, and follow these conventions, even though there's an octave ringing above the staff. Only the lowest one is written, or the one that fits inside of the from A to G is the range. If you write anything outside, it means you need something different. Could you play this first? Sure. Get the bottom part. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. And that's the basis. So if we just keep repeating that on a loop, making this continuo modular music making stuff, we start 1, 2, 3. Graphically, that's what we would expect to sound. But when you have a full armonia, this is actually what you're hearing. Cool. This is actually what we're hearing. And so the arpa jalisciense, which we don't have here, would be in 3 and then on top in a 6/8 on the right hand versus the left hand playing the bass, the right hand on top. That's why it's joined like a grand staff. The vihuela here has reentrant tuning, and because of that, we're doubling a lot of tones. So the G will have two Bs in unison, two Gs, and one D. That's the characteristic of reentrant tuning. It makes things a little bit louder. So instead of having double courses, if you tune down, it creates that sympathetic and unison. The tecalitlan, guitarra de golpe, this is tecalitlan tuning, urbana. Urbana, yeah. So this is an urbana tuning. This is the other instrument that's fallen out of vogue, but it's now making a resurgence because of public education programs in Texas. This is more along the construction of a Spanish guitar, right? No vaulted back. And we'll find these typically in the region of Michoacan. But same characteristics here, tied, locked directly on. Frets are slotted metal, and then these can either be bone or cane. Is this herringbone or is this bone? It's bone, yeah. So these first four are bone, and then these are metal. Again, you're hardly ever higher than open position. Because another aspect of the armonía, the way we play, and the reason it's notated the way it is because we can write the direct inversions, but this looks extremely complicated. Right? And we'll never play a G major higher than the G major that we play on the guitar or on the vihuela. The instruments sound out of tune. There's intonation issues, but also if you notice, each instrument has a little bit of a range of this clef. And so they fill in together and complement one another. So if you start playing, let's say, like something on the 5th fret of the guitar, you start interfering with the ranges of the vihuela and maybe the really start interfering. They have their tessituras. And that's another reason why you won't see any type of inversions. The armonía does not deal with inversions. Only the melodies are more careful about inverting parts, having first, seconds, or thirds, or the 5th or the 6th of the chord on top, ending on tonic, leading tone considerations all the time. Essentially just pivoting. So this is, would you like to play with this? So we're gonna make these sounds around topics.
We're in the trumpets.
He's here for string. Guitarra de golpe. Melissa, would you love to? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So you get the full effect of most of the instruments here playing in tandem. So son into D7 and G, D7 and son. No sé cómo vamos a hacer enfrente. Thank you guys so much. Guitarrón is typically in the center. Yeah, you're fine. One measure more. 7. 1, 2, 3. That full effect again, we wouldn't really know what song is being played if we're just vamping on these rhythms. It takes that combination of the melody and the harmony to bring about this effect. But thank you guys. Thank you so much. So again, taking this and reducing it. Most of the time, the harp music is not being played. The harp is going to improv most of its lines based off of this. And so with that, we're going to get into a song form. The rhythm that you heard is from the son de mariachi. They're amongst the most challenging genres to execute within the mariachi's repertoire. They're marked by superimposed meters between sections and metric modulations that create intricately interlocking rhythms. And sons comprise of 2 sections, sometimes 2 different types of playing. The son abajeño is one subgenre, and that has mixed meter and hemiolas, 2s stacked up against a 3. Whereas the son jalisciense, which you heard right now, employs a sesquialtera or sesquialtera. It's pretty much a word that reduces down a phrase, which means el seis que se altera. the sixth that alters itself, and the division of six between two beats of three, alternating with pulses of 3 2s, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. That's the system. And here you can see that division. Here's the two divisions, the 3 divisions of 2 and the 2 divisions of 3. Back and forth, alternating in strict alternation. And speaking on this one, part of my research in producing different types of notation, I was inspired through finding and discovering these older commercial recordings of mariachi music. This is from one of the very first slides. This is mariachi Populense de Justo Villa, who's the vihuela player, he's the director in charge. And what you're going to hear is mariachi in 1907, 1908, when they're still a string ensemble. They made a trip from Copula to Mexico City for Porfirio Díaz's 80th birthday, which was the president of Mexico at the time. And this is off of older technologies. Let's get this. It's really difficult to detect. If anything, it's just in compound meter over and over. There's no presence of the cystic data there. In further research on this ensemble, I'm trying to figure out as much as I can. I came across this text by Irán Dordeli Núñez, Cancelo del Cuarteto Populense Son y Salvaciones 2004, and his transcription delineates the mariachis. Everything you just heard is one melodic line by violins, and then the vihuela is just doing the same thing over and over with no indications. And then after the second measure, it's just implied, I guess, that it keeps doing the same thing and nothing changes. A voice comes in and there's no instrumentation in that transcription. I was kind of taken aback and seeing reading what Jonathan Clark had written based off of this recording. He said, well, it's just a very complex and interesting song. And that's all he had to say about it. And that the verses about the quill, and the scribe relate to its antiquity. So what makes it interestingly complex? What makes it rhythmically complex? Right? To me, as a researcher, this left something to be desired, and that's when I decided to produce my own transcription of this. And I said, well, I can't really hear an audible beat that one, so I'm not going to write one in. Maybe it's limitations of the technology, it could be a lot of factors. But I did take time now to invert the power dynamic and represent what was there. The vihuela and the guitarrón are in the front, the melodies are in the back. Paying attention a little bit more to the harmonia, writing things in where typically people or transcribers don't. For one, it's not in A major, it's sounding more in B flat. We have the harmonia there, and I'm privileging, again, the harmonia and not the melody. The melody, even though it's harmonized or doubled, or if they're singers, I'm just giving the focus line, the leading line. Actually doing something that was, I've been argued about this a lot by many practitioners, is the inclusion of this effect of apagones, which are typically not ever heard in sones past 1920. That's kind of a playing very different than, but it's supposedly the same song form. So I run the recording through a spectrum analysis device, and when I zoom into the threshold of limits and threshold of human hearing, we see that here around 322 hertz. You see dropouts here. This is the Vihuela part. So there's consistent markings of eighth notes. You can, and then dropouts where the one is. Here you can see one violin coming in unison, and then the second violin comes in a little bit later, and then it doubles. So ba ba bi, and then this violin jumps up to this part. So what you're seeing here is the fundamentals of the violins coming in, and then the harmonia in the first few seconds of that track. And all these other like faded parts are overtones, other artifacts from the recording technology. Here's where they begin to sing. Two voices and a violin aggregating. Interestingly enough, below the Vihuela's audible range, we don't see any hints of a guitarrón being performed or being registered on the recording. Many practitioners say, well, I hear a guitarrón, and I always ask, well, what are they playing so I can write it down? So all of this goes back to creating now a much more thorough and fleshed out part of this notation. If we ask mariachis to, even prolific mariachis, to play in the manner that we're hearing pre-Mexican Revolution, they're going to approximate at best or an idea of what they imagine mariachi would be like. But when we listen to the recordings as such, and we take time to transcribe in a way and put in violin and bone markings and all these things, we can. I think it's a very good compliment to recapture a little bit of what's lost. It's like saying that there's historically informed performance. There's instrumentation that uses period instruments, and they're going to great lengths through research to play in this manner. And we're, academically, I think this is one of the greatest contributions we can have towards performing mariachis. But it's seriously neglected or looked over. There's the guitarrón part, empty, but it's still there. You don't know if you
Why
record
don't you
it.
just come up with it?
Come up with it? What do you mean?
I don't know, figure it out, maybe make it work somehow. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you can actually, and that would be great. You can have an edition that's a critical edition, and maybe say, okay, well, not just this, this would be a guitarrón part based off of the next most recent recordings we can find, and this is what guitarrón players were doing maybe in that region, and then we can approximate that, but with a level of discernment and giving information to the performer, to whoever's practicing. Because I feel that this is one step away from rediscovering this in a large ensemble. From here becomes the adaptation to the full mariachi ensemble. And then we use this as another mode of teaching through the notation, rediscovering this old repertoire that has been gone. Or that, again, in 1960, everyone knows the version from 1960. That one's just everywhere. But this one is I think something we can still learn a lot from this. So that's one aspect where my research involves a lot of notation and challenging the conventions. And then the last one is TMA, like I said, I mentioned earlier, the way these all-state ensembles are vetted, and these individuals are vetted for these ensembles are through the writing of etudes. As soon as these are released, they have about 4 months to learn these pieces and then present them at the region level. Then they have them about another month to do the second page or the last third of the etude, which is significantly more difficult, and going to go to all-state level, hopefully make the all-state ensemble. So I'm taking, my process is that this is, because mariachi music has, especially the armonía, has very repetitive rhythms, I don't want to do that. That's the first thing. Another thing, the locking in of inversions and not adding flat nines or different ways of notating a rhythmic structure that are not necessarily always notated like that. This is more descriptive. That most people will write them straight notes and imply, well, you have to know. It's like, well, if you don't know, this is a little bit more accurate. And this is more representative of how it's supposed to sound. So I'm taking the song from even like the bolero that we mentioned earlier and completely turning it around, giving suggestions. Every single strum is accounted for. We're using chord extensions that are going to challenge the student because people, individuals call me, why did you do this? Why did you do it this way? And the only thing I can say is, well, it's an etude, which literally is a word that means to study. And so if you take a line a week, you'll have it. It's not meant to be subreadable. It's meant to teach you something or discover something on your instrument that years and years of playing you won't have access to. And so the complications with this, individuals calling TMEA and saying this is unplayable, smugly sometimes if they're friends I'll say, well, you didn't say it was supposed to be playable, you just said to write something. And then well, can you play it? I wasn't supposed to play it, I was just supposed to write it. And then we get into this power disbalance, because a lot of people will call in some educators at some of these most prominent schools will say, well, I'm not up on the reading too much. If you learn to read a little bit in harmonia, most of your career is over. But when it comes to something so specialized and something that this isn't a song, right? There's no reference recording for this. And the skill building to play through the notation and the repertoire will not get to you. And so I think that was my kind of challenge. How do you write something that's going to challenge everyone, that's going to make a contribution in a way that makes the playing field a little bit more level. Because what you'll see in competitions in Texas and in UIL is that you'll see schools with the most resources get the best. And there's a lot of students that, unfortunately, a lot of these the reason those were established because a lot of the other competitions don't enforce sight reading, don't enforce having scores for their competitions, and pit one school against the other as a ranking from first to last. You showed up, this is where you rank today. And I think it's a lot healthier, and why I encourage and support UIL and TMEA is because they're actually doing it in a manner that assesses the one group on their own merit based on where they are, their ensemble, and the music that they've selected, that they feel they sound best on. So just because someone is playing a flashier arrangement and someone plays a standard arrangement, but very well executed, they'll still have a chance to get a good grade. Instead of, well, that song everyone's heard it, everyone knows it. So some of the complexities here are just dealing with a lot of questions and being challenging here. And I've even shown, these first ones are dedicated to the mariachi players in Vargas. This one is to Roberto Alfaro's good friend of mine, he put that in us, and they saw it and they're like, okay, cool, but what does this have to do with mariachi? And we laugh about it, but I think in fact, mariachi also in harmonia praxis, because it's the least standardized, and the limitations of music notation software to be able to write things in a certain way, also limit the availability of students to learn a certain way. There was a lot more variation and proliferation when things were handwritten. And much more, moreover, if you handwritten scores to most students now, they can't read them. There's a lot more difficulty than with music engraving software.
Let's take the rest of the questions, if you don't mind, into the reception, and let's thank our guests.